Keep driving. Take it easy.
In 1996, a pair of convicted felons escaped across the country. When a foreign military officer disappeared along their trail, authorities wondered if the armed fugitives had become killers. The FBI raced to find the escapees before more victims crossed their path.
In Alabama, two desperate criminals fled the custody of a local deputy. Eluding authorities, they made their way across the country in a wave of car theft, abduction, and murder. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Escaped criminals believe they have nothing to lose. They'll do anything to avoid capture. After the convicts claimed their first victim, further bloodshed was inevitable, unless the FBI could find them and bring them to justice.
Central Alabama, May 21st, 1996. A DeKalb County deputy was assigned to transport 3 inmates from state prisons to face court dates. Michael Thompson was to be sentenced for murder.
What it is, I always.
The deputy knew Thompson, having transported him before.
What they putting you back up there for this?
Thompson had persuaded the deputy to let him sit in the front seat. Thompson had just met another inmate, Roger Yaden. The career criminal had 17 burglary convictions and 3 prison escapes on his record. The third inmate was on work release. The prisoners were not handcuffed for the short drive. As the group neared Talladega, Alabama, Thompson made his move. At gunpoint, Thompson forced the deputy to keep driving.
Keep him quiet. Take it easy.
He ordered him to drive to a secluded area in the woods near Lincoln, Alabama.
Open the door. Up.
Thompson and Yaden freed themselves. They marched their hostages into the woods.
Keep walking his feet, cool with it, man. Go, strip, go.
The men forced the deputy and the other inmate to strip out of their clothes.
Shut up. The shoes, too.
The deputy's extra handcuff key fell unnoticed to the ground.
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Bound in the remote woods, the officer didn't know if he would be executed.
Right, hurry up. Cut the clip. Let's go.
It's all right, I'll be riding with you again.
Thanks.
The 2 escapees simply ran off.
Have anything to do with this, man?
Michael Thompson and Roger Yaden took off in the direction of Talladega, leaving their prison clothes behind. It was Yaden's 4th escape from Alabama authorities. The deputy had to contact the sheriff's department. With a dropped handcuff key, he freed himself and the other inmate, then ran for help.
Get out.
The escaped convicts had the deputy's service weapon and a shotgun stored in the patrol car. Under the cover of law officers, the two felons endangered anyone in their path. The deputy and the remaining inmate had flagged down a motorist and reached the local police department.
Problem is, I push my head against the window.
Police immediately issued an urgent be on the lookout alert for the two escapees in the stolen patrol car.
One individual, Thompson, 6 foot.
DeKalb County law enforcement launched a search. But the area contained hundreds of miles of rural roads. Despite the search, no sightings of the fugitives or the deputy's car came in that day.
Okay, let's start with the description of the man who had the
It wasn't until the evening that authorities received their first clue to Thompson's and Yaden's actions. A local paramedic contacted Talladega City Police and told them about his ordeal. He said that earlier that day, he was driving near Talladega when he noticed a sheriff's patrol car following him. When he heard the siren, the off-duty paramedic pulled over. He believed it was a routine stop. The officer asked for his license and wallet. Paramedic Bob Gortney didn't think he'd been speeding.
The reason we pulled you over is your vehicle fits the description of a vehicle that was involved in a hit and run. And I told him, well, I haven't been in any accident. You know, you can check my truck, you can look around, it's not a scratch on it. And he said, well, your truck fits the description that we've gotten, so we're going to, check it out.
Gortney didn't suspect anything.
No flags went off when he first walked up to me because he was in full uniform, had the badge and the name tag, and I really didn't make contact with the whole uniform. I seen the gun when he had his hand on it.
Gortney gave the deputy his paramedic badge number, asking him to call in to verify his identity. But the deputy refused. Following the deputy's orders, the paramedic got into the patrol car. He believed it was simply a misunderstanding and that he would be released shortly.
He said, well, we're going to carry you back over here to the accident scene. And I said, well, that's fine, my truck doesn't fit the description, we'll just get this cleared up.
He first realized something was wrong when a man in civilian clothes carrying a shotgun ran from the patrol car to his truck.
Okay, let's start with the man approaching.
From the description, police believe the man driving the pickup was Roger Yaden. They believe Michael Thompson was the one dressed as the deputy. Thompson followed the pickup with the paramedic locked in the back.
What the deal is, you can have the truck.
Gortney asked for an explanation.
Keep it quiet.
He said, we're just going to take your truck. And I knew right then it was a kidnapping. These guys just kidnapped me. So I went into the pleading mode, I told him, I said, look, I'm only 30 years old. I've got a wife and kids, and you have my truck, you have my gun. There's no sense in killing me.
Michael Thompson followed behind to an isolated spot of the highway. Roger Yaden had found the paramedic's 9mm handgun in the truck. Bob Gortney was helpless in the patrol car's locked back seat.
What up?
I'm in.
The men forced him inside the cruiser's trunk. The kidnapped paramedic believed they were going to kill him.
I was laying there at the point, so if they shot through the trunk, I knew they would miss me. If a bullet was to come through, maybe it would graze me and not hit any vital organs, so I was trying to protect myself from the point of being shot through the trunk. And I could hear vehicles pass by, and then I heard my truck crank, and then I heard it sped off, and it was hot. I felt like I was suffocating. I kept thinking to myself, you need to slow down, because if you don't, you're going to use up all your energy, and plus it's hot in here, I'm going to dehydrate, and I'm probably going to pass out. I was scared. I was shaking, and I was laying in the trunk, and I got to thinking, okay, you're a paramedic. You've extricated people 1,000 times. Now it's time for you to do what you've learned to get yourself out of this trunk, to extricate yourself so you can still be alive.
Using a jack he found in the trunk, Courtney worked for 2 hours. Finally, he popped the trunk open. He ran to the nearest house where a woman called police.
Should just sit there for a minute, enjoy your coffee, and try to warm up. I'll be right with you.
An updated bulletin was issued for the pair of fugitives in the black pickup truck they were now driving.
232 to all units. This is a broadcast for 0900 suspect.
They were armed with 2 9mm handguns and a shotgun.
Armed and dangerous.
Authorities sped to the main interstate, figuring the fugitives would use it to flee the area. With a stolen truck full of gas and interstate highways nearby, law officers knew that Michael Thompson and Roger Yaden had a big lead on them. They could be anywhere. 7 days later, and 1,200 miles away, an abandoned black pickup truck with no license plates turned up in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. The vehicle identification number on the dash had been destroyed. But police located a second identification number on the truck's chassis. A record search showed that it was the Paramedic's truck stolen in Alabama. Because of the interstate travel, the FBI was notified. An immediate search of the area revealed no sign of Michael Thompson or Roger Yaden. The armed fugitives had dumped the one vehicle investigators could trace. On June 7th, 1996, the FBI in Birmingham, Alabama, filed a warrant for unlawful flight to avoid confinement. Police agencies across the country were notified to watch for any sign of Yaden and Thompson. 2 weeks later, 1,200 miles east of where the paramedic's stolen truck was recovered in New Mexico, a group of diving students spotted a car at the bottom of Fowler Lake near Terre Haute, Indiana. Indiana Department of Natural Resources agent Dean Jenkins responded with his team.
The car was laying, it was in about 25, 30 foot of water. It was on its top. The windshield had been broke out from when it sank. It apparently was driven off the ramp.
Indiana Department of Natural Resources officers dove into the lake to investigate. They found a red car with no license plates. Divers could see items from the vehicle, including traveler's checks resting on the bottom. There was no body nearby.
The degree of personal items we found and what they were, traveler's checks, those kind of things that would ordinarily you would think would be stolen or discarded along the way prior to someone just dumping a stolen car. I think that was the key thing that made me wonder what else was involved with this vehicle.
Investigators removed the car to process it on shore. In the trunk, technicians recovered a British passport for Army Major David Nichols. Traveler's checks and airline ticket stubs issued to the Major were found in the glove compartment. Among the items was an Alabama jail booking slip with a local Indiana name and address written on the back. Checking the car's identification number, investigators discovered it was a rental from Colorado, reported missing along with the Major 16 days after he had rented it.
VIN number is 726JJ6.
Because a foreign military officer was the likely victim of a crime, Supervisory Special Agent Jack Osborne from the FBI field office in Indianapolis was called in. He believed the name on the Alabama jail booking slip was the best lead in Major Nichols' disappearance.
From the booking slip that was found in the car, on the back side was several handwritten notes, not so much with phone numbers, but maybe somebody's first name and an address. One of those names and address led us to a relative of Mr. Yaden, who resided in Terre Haute.
The relative was an aunt of Roger Yaden's. He was one of 2 escaped convicts whom investigators had searched for in New Mexico. She told an agent that she did not know why her name was on the back of the Alabama jail booking slip. She also had no knowledge of Major Nichols, his red rental car, or that her nephew had escaped custody.
She told us that she did have a nephew, Roger Dale Yaden, who she believed was in custody in Alabama and had communicated a lot with him in writing as her children had.
She did say that Yaden had some old friends in the area, but she couldn't recall their names.
Do you have any idea how it might be?
If Roger Yaden had made it to Indiana, the FBI believed murderer Michael Thompson was with him. They knew the pair of escaped convicts had already threatened to kill 3 others in Alabama and were last seen with 2 handguns and a shotgun. Agents feared that Roger Yaden and Michael Thompson may have used one of those weapons on the missing British major. In June of 1996, the FBI and Indiana police searched for armed fugitives Michael Thompson and Roger Yaden, who had escaped from Alabama authorities. They were considered prime suspects in the disappearance of British Army Major David Nichols, whose rental car was found at the bottom of an Indiana lake. According to FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jack Osborne, an Alabama jail booking slip found inside the car linked the fugitives to the missing major.
The evidence certainly associated that vehicle with our missing major, and that he was not in and around Terre Haute, nor was he located in the lake. It likewise then identified our 2 escaped prisoners that we believed were together and did have possession of the British Army officer's car, and that they still possibly could be in the Terre Haute area.
Agents went to the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. to find out more about the major's travel itinerary.
Sent to us prior to his arrival.
The FBI needed to determine where and when Major Nichols may have crossed paths with the armed fugitives.
The British government provided us some very basic information that indicated a British Army officer of theirs had been in the United States, arriving on the 20th of May, arrived at Denver, and was to travel to New Mexico to attend a language school, and then to Texas to attend a second school.
On travel orders issued by NATO, Major David Nichols was scheduled to arrive at the first seminar in Albuquerque on May 26th. Nichols was a vice commander of the British Defense School of Languages, an expert linguist fluent in 5 languages. He told his wife and 3 children that he planned to sightsee for a few days before the seminar. But school officials in Albuquerque never heard from the major after he failed to arrive.
The FBI felt it was strange that the British Army officer had not attended school. The British government likewise, through contact they had with the family and friends of the missing major, felt that it was strange that he had not been in contact with them, which then caused the British government great concern.
Agent Osborne contacted the FBI field office in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Special Agent John Shum needed to determine where the major was last seen in the 450 miles between Denver and Albuquerque.
They gave us his itinerary, photos, descriptions, potential contacts here in the U.S. that he might have contacted once we couldn't find him where he was supposed to be. So they gave us a complete, what we would call a victimology of him, his background, personality.
Agents also checked the British Major's credit card purchases.
Hey, how you doing?
The last time he used his card was to buy gas in the small town of Raton on the Colorado-New Mexico border.
Can I take a look at it, please?
The gas station was just 150 miles from the place Michael Thompson and Roger Yaden, the escaped fugitives from Alabama, had abandoned the black pickup truck they had stolen. Agents wanted to confirm how far the British Major had traveled past Raton.
Yes, please.
They checked at a hotel in Old Town Albuquerque where the Major had made advance reservations. He never showed up, and his reservation was never canceled. The Major had disappeared somewhere between the gas station near the Colorado border, where his credit card had been used, and the hotel in Albuquerque. The FBI suspected Michael Thompson and Roger Yaden had abducted him, but they had vanished too. Agent Shum called the Major's wife in England to find out more about how her husband may have reacted if accosted by two desperate criminals.
She told me he was a very gentle man, he was a very good man, and that if he was confronted with by these people, that he would not have been confrontational. He would have been willing to do what they say, give them anything they want, just to avoid a confrontation. And she said that he would have been very concerned about his safety and being able to make it back to England to help raise his boys.
1,200 miles away in Indiana, close to the lake where the Major's car was found, local police received a call from a junkyard manager who reported seeing two suspicious men on his property. When the officer arrived, the two men fled from a pickup truck loaded with scrap metal. It was unsafe for a lone officer to follow two men into the woods. He called in the truck's license plate numbers and learned the vehicle had been stolen. Crime scene technicians processed the truck. They found a tag from a video camera strap that belonged to Major David Nichols. They also recovered a letter that was addressed to fugitive Roger Yaden's mother in Alabama.
And it was generally saying that he was out of prison and was generally going to be staying in the Terre Haute area.
When agents contacted Yaden's mother in Alabama, she said she hadn't heard from her son and had no idea where he might be.
No, things are going fine.
Investigators were sure the fugitives were nearby.
We got both your photographs. The items that were recovered in that truck were extremely important because it not only associated Yaden and Thompson with that vehicle, it also associated the missing Major with that vehicle.
It was more compelling evidence that Yaden and Thompson were likely responsible for the Major's disappearance. But the armed fugitives were moving fast, and the FBI was still one step behind. In the summer of 1996, the FBI continued their hunt for escaped Alabama convicts Michael Thompson and Roger Yaden. Agents suspected they had carjacked a British man who was still missing, then dumped his rental car in a lake near Terre Haute, Indiana, where Roger Yaden had relatives. At a nearby high school, the FBI and Indiana investigators had established a satellite command post. They received a court order to examine Yaden's local juvenile record.
Because we might very well need support.
They noticed that Yaden often got into trouble with one particular friend. Checking the friend's background, they learned that he managed a nearby auto salvage yard. Indianapolis FBI Special Agent William Hamilton would chase the lead.
My partner and I decided that we would drive a unmarked vehicle into this area in an undercover capacity under the ruse of looking for a specific auto part.
The 5-acre property was a good hiding place. It was filled with a maze of cars surrounded by dense woods. Agents staked out the location.
I just haven't seen anything in a while. It's just not moving.
They needed to confirm that Yaden's childhood friend was on duty. In order to assure their identities would not be discovered, they left their badges and weapons in their vehicle.
After going all the way to the far south end of the salvage yard, we noticed a trailer back in the woods, and there was 2 white males there working.
The men fit the general description of the armed fugitives, but the unarmed agents could not be sure.
Hello.
They hoped to learn more from the manager.
You get a lot of stuff in.
The undercover agents engaged him in small talk and confirmed that he was a friend of Roger Yaden's.
The childhood friend, he indicated that he'd known Yaden for several years. They had both came to his residence in early June, and they showed up there in a red Taurus.
That car matched the description of the missing Major's vehicle. By the time the agents finished their conversation, the 2 men they had glimpsed earlier were gone. The FBI believed those 2 men had been Thompson and Yaden. After assembling an arrest team, agents and local officers raced back to the salvage yard. On the way, they noticed a pickup speeding in the opposite direction. One agent spotted Roger Yaden inside, traveling with the salvage yard manager. They couldn't see if Michael Thompson was also with them. Investigators gave chase. They trailed the truck to a dead end. Yaden jumped out and headed for the woods. The fugitive's childhood friend was detained for questioning. He said Yaden had forced him to lead police on a chase until he could jump out of the truck. Assured he had not intentionally harbored the suspects, police later released the friend.
The childhood friend knew nothing of their recent criminal behavior. He had only knew that Yaden had been in jail once for burglary.
Roger Yaden had eluded pursuing investigators. A canine unit was called in to track him. The highly trained dog picked up a scent.
Mike. Mike. Mike.
On July 2nd, 1996, Roger Yaden decided he was finished running. But his accomplice, convicted murderer Michael Thompson, was still at large. Having Yaden in custody was only a partial victory, according to FBI Special Agent Jack Osborne.
After Yaden's arrest, this is not over at all. We know that we're now dealing with another fugitive, maybe the worst of the 2 fugitives. We do not know where he's at. If he's still on the property, if he's in the trailer, if he's in the woods, if he has a weapon or not.
Come out with your hands up.
Suspecting Michael Thompson took refuge in the auto salvage yard's trailer. Law enforcement teams surrounded it.
Thompson, this is Special Agent Hamilton with the FBI. You are surrounded. I repeat, with the FBI.
They ordered him to come out unarmed.
You are surrounded. This is a warning. We are going
Agents
to
warned
fire
anyone inside
tear
that the
gas.
trailer would be
Come
tear
out with
gassed.
your hands up. Again, I repeat, we are going to fire tear gas.
There was no response.
Come out with your hands up.
The atmosphere was very tense. We did not know if Thompson was inside the trailer with maybe a long gun or even a handgun, positioned on some of our people. So we had to maintain cover all around the perimeter of the trailer.
Come out with your hands up. You will not be harmed.
Authorities gave the signal to use the gas. Stormed the trailer. No one knew if escaped murderer Michael Thompson was armed and barricaded inside.
Mr. Thompson, I repeat, Mr. Thompson, you need to come out.
On July 2nd, 1996, after capturing Alabama fugitive Roger Yaden in Indiana, FBI agents stormed a salvage yard trailer where they believed his partner was hiding. But Indiana Department of Natural Resources agent Dean Jenkins and his team did not find convicted killer Michael Thompson inside.
That was a terrible disappointment because we figured we were on to him. We caught one, we were looking to get the other one and pretty much make it a clean sweep, and he wasn't in there.
Agents questioned the salvage yard manager, a childhood friend of Yaden's who had unknowingly harbored the fugitives. He said he had no idea where Thompson might be hiding, but he did show agents where Yaden and Thompson kept their belongings. From the trunk of a car, agents retrieved a suitcase labeled with the name of missing British Major David Nichols. The Major's clothes and personal effects were still inside. Agents believed the fugitives had carjacked the Major in New Mexico. The search team secured a 3-mile perimeter around the salvage yard and told the man to call immediately if he spotted Thompson.
We used canines and broke up into teams of 3 and 4 officers with canines and searched the area, ran tracks all throughout the lot, the salvage yard area, and then the surrounding woods looking for him, and that took an awfully long time. That went from the time they inserted the gas in the afternoon well past darkness.
With a convicted killer on the loose, FBI and local law enforcement could not afford to wait. They patrolled roadways and fields, hoping to flush Thompson from hiding. Despite hours of searching, the fugitive had eluded them once again.
Markings on the outside.
In the morning, agents considered the possibility that Thompson may have somehow slipped past the perimeter. They had no way of knowing if he was still in the immediate area. Then Special Agent William Hamilton got the call they were hoping for.
All right, good. Listen, don't go near him. We're going to be there.
On July the 3rd, the morning following the arrest of Roger Yaden, the childhood friend of Yaden telephoned me and advised me that the subject, Thompson, was asleep in the junkyard in the back of one of the cars near his residence, the trailer.
The team was concerned that Thompson would be armed. There was no telling what the desperate fugitive would do when cornered. Exhausted from running, the killer gave up without a fight. After 43 days, 6,000 miles, and thousands of man-hours, the last fugitive wanted in Major Nichols' disappearance was in custody. Thompson refused to talk to investigators. But Roger Yaden, apprehended the day before, felt differently. Hoping for leniency from federal authorities, Yaden agreed to tell investigators what they wanted to know.
We also need a new car. We need to ditch the pickup.
FBI Special Agent Jack Osborne led the questioning.
Had about $200.
Yes. We only have one.
He indicated a willingness to give us a statement, to provide all of the information that he and Thompson were involved in, to include the initial escape, to include the carjacking in Alabama. And this is the first time that we learned that the British Army officer had been killed.
In the black pickup the pair had carjacked from Alabama, the fugitives made their way to New Mexico, selling tools from the truck for money. When their cash ran out, they decided to rob and carjack another victim. They staked out a remote rest area 100 miles south of Raton, New Mexico, the last known town where British Major Nichols had traveled. The convicts figured that tourists would be traveling with a lot of money and waited for someone who was traveling alone. That's when the British Major pulled up. As they had done in Alabama, they forced their victim into the trunk of the car. Thompson drove the Major's rental car, while Yaden followed in the truck. From Yaden's account, the British Major reacted to the crime as the Major's wife had predicted he would, according to Special Agent John Shum.
Everything she said about him is exactly what Yaden told us happened, that Major Nichols was non-confrontational. He did what he could to keep the situation from escalating. He talked about his 3 boys in England, about how he needed to get back there for them, and he asked that he not be hurt because he was concerned about what would happen to his children.
Nothing to do with it. I was in the pickup truck. I was in the back.
Yaden said Thompson had planned the whole thing and that he was calling the shots. They drove 50 miles until it was dark, then pulled into a deserted area off the highway. At gunpoint, Thompson forced Major Nichols out of the trunk. Without warning, he shot him in the back of the head. Thompson turned the Major over and shot again. They hid his body at the site, then abandoned the pickup truck several miles away. Yaden said Thompson never explained why he had killed this carjacking victim.
You didn't have to kill him.
The pair of fugitives drove Major Nichols' car to Indiana, where they dumped it in Fowler Lake.
Tell us about the gun.
Roger Yaden had confessed his crimes to the FBI, but he wanted a deal before he gave up the location of Major Nichols' body.
He wanted to hold back until he could get some assurance from the government that we would not seek the death penalty against him. If that occurred, then he was willing to help us find the body of the missing Major if we had not located the body already.
All right, so let's talk about this deal. What are you looking for here?
Agents met with Yaden and his lawyer.
What kind of time are you talking about?
The prisoner said he would tell them where the body was if they also promised he would not serve time in an Alabama state prison.
And you want the federal. What's going on?
We need to know
Initial searches without his help turned up nothing. FBI Special Agent John Shum was worried the Major's body would not be found without Yaden's help.
I don't follow this. What is the deal?
The most important thing for us to do was find Major Nichols' body. That was going to be important to be successful in any prosecution, and it was important for us because it was the right thing to do. Since we couldn't make him safe in this country, since we couldn't guarantee his safety, at least we could return his body to his family.
So, what are we going to get out of this? You think you're asking for a federal facility?
Federal prosecutors agreed to the deal.
It's all written out.
What are you looking at?
Yaden led investigators to a secluded spot in the New Mexico wilderness. The prisoner was an accomplished escape artist, having fled custody more than once.
Well, we were very concerned about that because he had escaped 4 times before in Alabama. He was obviously very good at that. Plus, we had to be concerned about our own safety. So not only did we focus on the mission of finding Major Nichols' body, but we had to be very, very concerned about making sure Roger Yaden was not trying to deceive us and just using this as a ruse to set up an escape attempt.
FBI field agents were wary as a SWAT team secured the location. They had no way of knowing if Yaden might have friends in the area waiting to strike at agents. On September 24, 1996, recaptured prisoner Roger Yaden led the FBI into the New Mexico desert, where he claimed the body of Major David Nichols remained hidden after being murdered. Yaden would be spared the death penalty if he could locate the remains. FBI Special Agent John Shum recalls that the likelihood of finding the body without Yaden's help was slim.
It was a very desolate area. It was off of a very little used 2-lane highway in New Mexico in a very remote area. And then off this 2-lane highway, we had to go down a gravel road for approximately a mile. And then off the gravel road, we had to drive into a cattle pasture for several hundred yards. So it was incredibly remote.
Agents were concerned that Yaden had taken them there as a ruse to effect another escape. Finally, Yaden pointed out a spot to the agents.
There it is.
And even Yaden himself seemed very somber and respectful of the situation we were in, that we had finally located this man's body and we're going to be able to give him a proper resting place now.
Didn't you say something about
Exposure to the elements made identification impossible. Examiners took dental x-rays, which were later matched to records sent from England.
Right.
Major Nichols' family in Britain was notified. The officer's murderer, Michael Thompson, avoided a possible death sentence by pleading guilty in federal court to carjacking and murdering a foreign official. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. For kidnapping, robbery, and escape in Alabama, Thompson received 5 additional life sentences. In exchange for his cooperation, Roger Yaden was allowed to plead guilty to only 1 count of carjacking and was sentenced to 18 years. Yaden was afraid of Alabama state prisons. As part of his deal, he was to serve his sentence in a federal facility.
Yaden, time to get up.
He was temporarily held at a county jail in Las Vegas, New Mexico, until he could be transferred.
Yaden, let's go. Yaden, get up. Come on. Get up.
Remarkably, Roger Yaden had escaped again. 2 other inmates also made the breakout with Yaden.
Hey, go.
The search party with a dog team tracked Yaden's scent from jail. But the trail ended at an interstate highway. Later that day, authorities captured one of 2 other inmates who escaped with Yaden.
Go ahead.
The inmate had injured his leg in the attempt and was unable to get far on foot. He explained to authorities how they got out. He said that Yaden had designed the plan. In the jail's black market, he bartered for an Allen wrench and a hacksaw. Yaden unlocked maintenance panels to gain access to air ducts that led to the roof. He cut through ductwork, then the roof to get outside. A 4th man stayed behind to replace the panel. The escapees moved along the roof of the jail, then jumped over the wall. Once on the outside, the inmates said they split up. That was the last time he saw Yaden. Prison officials called FBI Special Agent John Shum to give him the bad news.
And once I heard Yaden escaped yet again from federal custody, my first reaction was I was very angry, because here was a guy that had a history of having escaped numerous times in the past. The people that were responsible for his custody knew his history, and they should have been more careful.
Investigators believed Yaden would likely head toward family and friends in DeKalb County, Alabama.
Have you seen Roger lately?
No, he's been
Agents
in jail
interviewed
for
anyone
some
Yaden
time.
might have contacted in the area, including an ex-girlfriend.
Have you talked to him on the phone? Letter?
No letters.
Like the others, she said she hadn't seen or heard from him. They left a card and told her to call if Yaden surfaced.
Think of anything, call him?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you that.
After the agents left, she admitted to her current boyfriend that she had let Yaden hide in her house.
It was an accident.
He was upstairs in the attic.
Guy, but I guess he's your guy, but he's gotten himself into a lot of trouble.
The boyfriend was upset and called police. Nearby officers responded. They didn't know if Yaden was armed and waiting for them. Five weeks after his escape from New Mexico, officers finally cornered Roger Yaden. Captured in DeKalb County, Alabama, Roger Yaden's crime spree ended where it began. His escape nullified the deal with federal prosecutors.
Check this area.
He was charged with the crimes he had committed during his last escape from Alabama. Alabama Assistant Attorney General David Estes prosecuted Yaden in Talladega.
The jury in this case deliberated for a very short period of time, an hour at the most, and they came back and they convicted Roger Dale Yaden of 3 counts of kidnapping in the first degree, 2 counts of robbery in the first degree, and 1 count of escape in the first degree.
Yaden received 5 concurrent life sentences without parole. Now in maximum lockdown, Roger Yaden will never leave Alabama prison alive.